Across the quiet countryside and forgotten towns of Indiana, there are buildings that once roared with life. Massive wheels turned day and night. Machinery screamed and groaned. Workers labored in heat, dust, and darkness. These were the mills. Windows shattered. Floors rotting. Silence pressing heavy against rusted iron. But when night falls, these places are not empty. Footsteps echo through broken halls. Machinery hums without power. Shadows move where no one should be standing. Locals whisper that the mills never truly shut down. They remember every injury. Every accident. Every life lost to grinding gears and collapsing beams. Some who explore these abandoned mills report whispers calling them deeper inside, cold hands brushing past in the dark, and figures watching from upper floors that no longer exist. Tonight, we journey into the forgotten industrial heart of Indiana to uncover the most haunted abandoned mills, places where the past still works through the night. If you heard heavy machinery start running inside a building abandoned for decades, would you stay to investigate, or would you run before the doors close behind you? Hello, my dear friend. I hope you are safe and at ease, because the places we are about to explore were built for labor, sacrifice, and survival, not comfort. Indiana played a powerful role in America's industrial growth. Its mills processed grain, lumber, steel, and textiles, fueling towns and families for generations. But progress came at a cost. Many workers were injured. Some never made it home. Others vanished without explanation. When the mills closed, they were left to decay, but the memories remained. Visitors speak of echoing screams trapped in metal walls, shadows pacing catwalks, and the feeling of being watched by something that never clocked out. These abandoned mills are not just ruins. They are time capsules of suffering and restless energy. Before we step inside, let me ask you something. If you were exploring an abandoned mill and heard your name whispered from a darkened stairwell, would you follow the voice, or would you leave before it followed you instead? Black Hollow Grain Mill stands alone along a narrow rural road, its silhouette rising above fields that have long since gone quiet. The road that leads to the mill is rarely traveled now. Grass grows thick along its edges, and the air carries a constant stillness. Birds avoid the immediate area, choosing fence posts farther away. Even in daylight, the mill seems to absorb sound, dulling footsteps and swallowing echoes before they can travel far. At night, the mill feels different. As darkness settles, a faint scent drifts through the air around the building. It is the smell of old grain dust mixed with machine oil, unmistakable to those who recognize it. The scent does not grow stronger near any specific opening. It simply hangs in the air, as if released by the structure itself. Visitors who approach after sunset often pause, struck by how familiar the smell feels despite the mill being empty for so long. It carries the impression of work paused rather than ended, as if production stopped suddenly and never fully let go. The first sound usually comes without warning. A low, steady rush fills the interior of the mill, resembling grain pouring through chutes. The sound moves downward, cascading from upper levels to the floor below. It is smooth and continuous, exactly as it would have been when the silos were full and the machinery active. But the silos are empty. Those who listen closely can hear individual layers within the sound, grain striking metal, sliding along wood, settling in unseen bins. The illusion is so precise that some step back instinctively, expecting dust clouds or movement to follow. Nothing does. The pouring sound fades gradually, as if a gate has been closed. Silence returns briefly, heavy and expectant. Then footsteps begin above. They echo across the upper floors, slow and deliberate. They echo across the upper floors, slow and deliberate. Each step carries weight, creaking across old planks that have not supported regular movement in years. Each step carries weight, creaking across old planks that have not supported regular movement in years. The footsteps do not rush. They pace the length of the floor, pause, then resume in another direction. Visitors standing below often tilt their heads, tracking the sound. The footsteps never approach stairwells. They remain on the upper levels, always just out of sight. When someone calls out or shifts position, the steps hesitate briefly, then continue as before. Moments later, the mill answers itself. A deep mechanical groan rises from within the structure. It is a low vibration, felt through the ground as much as heard. The sound resembles old machinery straining under load, gears turning slowly against resistance. It builds for several seconds, filling the mill with pressure and resonance. Then it stops. The silence that follows feels sharper than before. The air seems to settle, as if something has completed a cycle and powered down. The scent of dust and oil lingers, unchanged. These sequences repeat through the night. Grain pouring where no grain exists. Footsteps on floors that should be unstable. Machinery groaning without power or motion. Each sound begins and ends cleanly, without overlap or confusion. As if following a routine learned long ago. Those who spend extended time near Black Hollow grain mill describe a strong sense of order. The sounds do not feel random or chaotic. They follow a pattern consistent with how the mill once operated. The timing between events remains steady, giving the impression of a shift still being worked, long after the workers have gone. Local stories suggest the mill was once the heart of the surrounding farmland. At its peak, it ran late into the night during harvest season. Workers moved across the upper floors, monitoring flow and adjusting machinery. Grain poured continuously. Engines groaned under the weight of production. The mill never truly slept during those years. When operations ceased, the shutdown was abrupt. Equipment was left in place. Silos were emptied, but the structure itself was not dismantled. The road grew quiet and the fields changed use. The mill remained, watching the land move on without it. Some believe the building remembers. The wood, soaked with vibration and sound for decades, may have absorbed the rhythm of its purpose. At night, when temperatures shift and the air grows still, the structure releases what it holds, replaying the patterns embedded within its frame. Others suggest natural causes. Wind moving through hollow spaces can create pouring sounds. Old buildings shift and creak as temperatures drop. Metal contracts, producing groans that echo through empty chambers. The human mind, surrounded by darkness and expectation, fills gaps with familiar interpretations. Yet those who hear the sounds insist on their clarity. The grain does not sound like water or wind. The sequence repeats too faithfully to be coincidence. By early morning, Black Hollow grain mill falls silent again. The scent fades with the rising sun. The air grows neutral. No sound moves through the structure. Birds cautiously return to nearby fields. And the road resumes its quiet emptiness. In daylight, the mill looks inert and harmless. Its doors hang open, revealing empty silos and rusted equipment frozen in place. No sign of recent activity. No dust disturbed. No tracks on the floor. But those who have visited at night carry the experience with them. They remember the sound of grain pouring from nothing. The footsteps pacing above. The deep groan of machines waking briefly from long rest. Black Hollow grain mill remains hidden along its quiet road, abandoned but not silent, waiting each night to run its shift once more, driven by memory rather than grain. Iron Creek Lumber Mill sits in a clearing carved from thick forest, its weathered buildings surrounded by tall trees that seem to lean inward. The woods press close, muffling distant sound and narrowing the sky above. Visitors often notice the sensation immediately, a quiet awareness that they are being observed from somewhere beyond sight. The mill itself stands silent now. Wooden walls are darkened by age and moisture. Rusted metal frames and old machinery rest where they were last left, frozen in time. The air smells faintly of oil, damp wood, and earth. Footsteps echo sharply on the floor, carrying farther than expected, as if the space is listening carefully to every movement. It is not tied to any single direction. Eyes seem to follow from the corners of vision, from behind beams, from between the trees outside broken windows. The forest remains still. The machinery does not move. The movement is slow and deliberate. They should be motionless, bound by rust and dust. The movement is slow and deliberate. A blade rotates just enough to be noticed, its metal whispering softly as it shifts against the air. There is no power source. No vibration. No mechanical reason for motion. The blade never accelerates. It turns a few degrees, pauses, then continues again, as if guided by patience rather than force. Those who notice it often freeze. The sound returns next. The noise of wood being cut rises suddenly from the depths of the mill. A familiar grinding rhythm fills the space, echoing through beams and corridors. It sounds fresh and sharp, as if blades are biting into timber nearby. The scent of cut wood seems to follow, rich and immediate. Men shout warnings. The voices are urgent, layered, calling out to one another from different directions. Their words are indistinct but clear in intent, filled with the tension of work where timing matters. The shouts overlap, echoing off walls that have heard them before. Then the sounds stop. Silence returns abruptly, leaving only the forest and the slow creak of the building. No one appears. No machine runs. The mill returns to its empty state as if nothing occurred. Sharp pains strike without warning. A brief shock across the shoulder or leg. The pain fades almost as quickly as it arrives, leaving no mark behind. The effect is unsettling. No splinters fly. No objects fall. Yet the sensation returns for those who remain, unpredictable and abrupt. Machinery seems poised, waiting. Shadows shift where no light changes. The air hums faintly, vibrating with the suggestion of work unfinished. Every sound feels amplified, footsteps ringing like signals through the space. They describe a sense of danger that cannot be reasoned away. The mill does not threaten loudly. It warns quietly, through sound and sensation, through the feeling that rules from another time still apply. Those who stay longer report a strange clarity. They become aware of where not to stand, which paths feel wrong, which areas demand attention. The mill seems to enforce an invisible order, guiding movement through discomfort rather than instruction. Outside, the forest remains still. Trees stand as they always have, silent witnesses to years of labor and loss. The creek nearby moves steadily, carrying sound away from the clearing. Yet even beyond the mill walls, the feeling of being watched persists, following visitors to the edge of the trees. Locals speak of Iron Creek with respect. They remember stories of long days, dangerous work, and the constant need for awareness. The mill demanded focus. Mistakes carried consequences. Warnings were shouted for a reason, and those who ignored them paid a price. The mill does not forget those rules. It does not distinguish between past and present. The sounds of cutting wood and shouted warnings return as reminders, not hauntings, but echoes of urgency that never fully faded. By late afternoon, the feeling eases slightly. Light filters through broken windows, softening shadows. The blades remain still. The air grows quieter. Yet few stay until dusk. As evening approaches, the forest darkens, and the mill feels more awake. Sounds travel farther. Shadows deepen. The mill remains standing, surrounded by trees that have grown back into the space once cleared by human hands. Those who visit leave with stories that are difficult to explain. They remember spinning blades without power. Voices calling out from empty rooms. Sudden pain with no source. Most of all, they remember the feeling of being observed by something that understands danger better than they do. The mill does not chase. It does not shout. It waits. And for those who linger too long, it reminds them that some places still operate by the rules of another time. Where attention was survival, and ignoring a warning carried consequences that could arrive without warning, swift and unseen. The Wabash River textile mill stands low and heavy beside the slow-moving water. Its brick walls darkened by decades of damp air and industrial residue. The river bends close to the structure, pressing against its foundation with quiet persistence. During the day, the mill appears abandoned and inert, its windows boarded, its doors sealed, its presence defined more by weight than activity. The stains along the walls tell their own history. Dark streaks trail downward from broken gutters and rusted fixtures, marking where rain and time have worked together. The building feels less like a ruin and more like something paused, waiting. As daylight fades, the mill begins to change. The river reflects the last light of the sky, turning the water into a moving sheet of gray. The air cools quickly near the shoreline, and sound carries farther than expected. Small noises feel amplified, as if the mill itself listens. After sunset, faint light appears behind the boarded windows. At first, it looks like reflection from passing clouds or distant traffic. The glow is uneven, pulsing softly from within. The glow flickers and fades, then returns, never settling into a steady source. The boards remain intact, offering no clear view inside, yet the light presses against the gaps as though trying to escape. Those who watch long enough notice patterns. The light moves from one window to another, tracing paths along the interior walls. It pauses, dims, then brightens again elsewhere, suggesting movement through the building rather than a fixed source. Inside, the atmosphere is heavy. Explorers who enter describe a sudden drop in temperature, even on warm nights. The air smells of old fabric, oil, and river moisture. Dust hangs undisturbed until movement sends it drifting into the glow of flashlights. The floor creaks underfoot, not sharply, but with a low, tired sound. Voices begin almost immediately. The sound seems to come from everywhere at once, rising from walls, floors, and empty spaces between machines. They are not loud. They do not shout or call out. Instead, they whisper in overlapping tones, layered so closely together that individual words are difficult to separate. The sound seems to come from everywhere at once, rising from walls, floors, and empty spaces between machines. Listening closely reveals fragments of rhythm rather than speech. Short bursts of sound repeat, pause, and resume, like patterns learned through repetition. The whispers swell and recede, never forming a single voice, but creating the impression of many working at once. Dust coats every surface, softening edges and dulling metal. Despite the stillness, the space feels occupied. Some explorers report seeing movement between the looms. At the edge of vision, shapes pass slowly from one machine to another. They move with purpose, following narrow paths worn into the floor. When light is directed toward them, the shapes do not vanish immediately. They linger just long enough to be recognized as human in outline. Faces remain the most unsettling detail. Those who glimpse the figures describe faces that appear unfinished, blurred as if seen through water or fog. The whispers grow louder near these areas, overlapping more tightly, filling the air with soft urgency. The figures do not acknowledge observers. They continue their motion, hands lifting and lowering in practiced movements that no longer connect to working machinery. Instead, it feels like work continuing beyond its purpose. The mill once operated day and night, driven by demand and proximity to the river. Water-powered machines. Workers filled the space with motion and noise. Over time, production slowed. The looms stopped. The building was left behind, but its internal rhythm never fully ceased. Those familiar with the mill's history speak of long hours and repeated tasks, of motions performed so often they became instinct. The whispers heard today seem to follow that same logic, repeating patterns learned long ago. What makes the sightings unsettling is their consistency. Different visitors report similar movements in similar locations, even when exploring separately. The figures always remain between the looms. They never approach the exits. Their paths remain contained within the heart of the mill. Lights flicker again as night deepens. From outside, the glow behind the boarded windows intensifies briefly, then fades. The river reflects the light in broken lines, stretching it across the water before swallowing it completely. From a distance, the mill appears active, alive in a way that contradicts its abandoned state. Inside, the whispers eventually soften. After long periods, they thin out, leaving pockets of silence that feel unnatural in such a large space. Movement slows. The figures become harder to see, their outlines dissolving into shadow and dust. The light disappears from the windows. The whispers fade entirely. The looms stand silent once more, untouched and unmoved. Sunlight filters through cracks in the boards, illuminating nothing but empty space. Those who leave the mill often do so quietly, carrying a sense of having interrupted something ongoing rather than discovering something forgotten. The mill remains, dark and sealed, its walls holding more than brick and stain. At night, when light flickers behind boarded windows and whispers fill the air, the past does not replay itself dramatically. It simply continues. Workers move between looms that no longer run. The Wabash River Textile Mill stands as a place where work never truly ended, only faded into a quieter form. Waiting patiently for night to fall again. Red Ash Flour Mill stands beside a slow bend in the river, its brick walls darkened by age and weather. From a distance, the structure looks quiet and stable, a relic of industry left behind by time. Ivy creeps along broken windows. Rust stains the iron fittings. The river moves on without pause, reflecting a building that refuses to disappear. Long ago, fire tore through part of the mill. The blaze did not consume everything. It moved unevenly, racing through storage rooms and upper floors. Then starving itself of air and collapsing inward. Stone and brick survived where wood did not. When the flames finally died, they left behind a shell that looked scorched but standing, as if the building had endured something it was never meant to. Decades have passed since that night. Yet visitors notice the smell before they notice anything else. A faint scent of burning flour drifts through the air, warm and dry, unlike ordinary smoke. The scent comes and goes without warning, strongest in still air, then gone entirely when the wind shifts. There is no visible source. No ash falls. The scent simply appears, convincing enough to make people pause and breathe carefully. Inside the mill, sound behaves strangely. Footsteps echo too loudly, then not at all. Small movements seem amplified, while larger ones disappear into the vast interior. The smell lingers here longer, collecting in corners and stairwells, rising from empty rooms as if released from the walls themselves. It is often then that visitors hear the coughing. It comes from deeper inside the building, dry and urgent, as though someone is struggling to clear their lungs. The sound carries through corridors, bouncing off stone and metal, impossible to place. It does not repeat in a predictable way. One cough. Then silence. Then another, farther away. Some respond instinctively. They call out, expecting an answer. None comes. The coughing fades, replaced by the sound of hurried footsteps. Shoes striking concrete. A rapid pace. Frantic movement that suggests urgency without direction. The footsteps race across upper levels, then stop suddenly, leaving a silence that feels heavier than before. Those who investigate find nothing. Stairwells lead to empty landings. Rooms hold only dust and broken machinery. No signs of recent use appear. Yet the sense of movement lingers, as though the sound itself has momentum that does not need a body to carry it. Shadows appear next. They form along walls and behind pillars, darker than the surrounding darkness. Human in outline, but uneven, as if covered in soot. Their edges blur and smear slightly, like ash dragged across stone. The shadows move slowly at first, then faster when noticed. Visitors describe the same pattern. A shadow crosses a doorway. A figure stands briefly at the end of a hall. A shape leans around a corner, then withdraws. Each time, the movement feels deliberate. Observant. Testing whether it has been seen. When approached, the shadows vanish. They do not retreat down corridors. They do not fade gradually. They disappear instantly, leaving bare walls behind. The air where they stood feels cooler, heavy with the smell of burned grain, as if something has just passed through. As exploration continues, the mill seems to narrow. Corridors feel longer than they should. Rooms connect in ways that do not match the building's exterior. Familiar paths lead back to unfamiliar spaces. The sound of coughing returns, closer now, followed by hurried footsteps that circle without ever revealing their source. Many visitors feel a growing pressure in their chest. Breathing becomes shallow. The air feels thick, dusty, though no dust is visible. The smell intensifies, triggering memories of heat and smoke even in those who have never experienced a fire. Those who linger too long report dizziness. Walls seem to tilt slightly. Shadows stretch where no light source exists. The building feels active, not collapsing, but working, as if reliving a moment that never fully ended. By daylight, the mill appears calmer. The smell weakens but does not disappear. Sunlight fills broken windows, softening shadows and revealing empty spaces clearly. Yet the marks remain. Dark stains on stone that resemble soot but cannot be wiped away. Scratches on floors where heavy machinery once stood. Footprints that appear briefly in thin layers of dust, then fade without explanation. Locals treat Red Ash Flour Mill with quiet respect. They do not linger inside. They speak of the fire as if it never fully ended, as if some part of the building remains caught in that night. According to them, the smell is not residue, but memory. The sounds are not echoes, but motion repeating itself. Animals avoid the structure. Birds do not nest in its upper beams. Rodents pass around it rather than through. Insects gather near the river instead of the mill walls. The building stands isolated, not just by abandonment, but by choice. Those who leave often carry the experience with them. The smell returns unexpectedly days later, brief and unmistakable. Sounds of hurried footsteps echo in quiet places. Shadows seem darker in peripheral vision, gone when faced directly. The Red Ash Flour Mill remains upright, its walls holding more than brick and ash. It holds a moment suspended between before and after, when fire moved faster than thought and escape felt just out of reach. Visitors do not see the flames. They do not feel heat. Yet the building offers reminders in subtler ways. A cough in the distance. Footsteps that never arrive. A shadow that watches, soot dark and silent, before vanishing back into the walls. The fire is long gone. But the mill has never truly cooled. Silent Gear Mill stands at the edge of an abandoned industrial zone, its brick walls darkened by age and weather. The building rises heavy and square against the sky, windows clouded with dust and time. By day it appears dormant, a relic of machinery and labor left behind when the work ended and people moved on. Inside, the gears remain. They are massive, interlocked wheels of steel, each tooth worn smooth by decades of motion. Rust has touched their surfaces, but they are intact, aligned, and balanced as if maintained by careful hands. The mill floor stretches around them in long corridors and open chambers, all built to support the weight and rhythm of turning metal. During daylight hours, the mill is silent. Visitors walk through cautiously, their footsteps echoing off concrete and iron. The air smells faintly of oil and dust. Light filters in through broken panes, casting rigid patterns across the gears. Nothing moves. The mill feels empty, preserved, waiting. Night changes that expectation. As darkness settles outside, a low vibration begins to rise from beneath the floor. It is subtle at first, easy to dismiss as distant traffic or wind. But as hours pass, the sensation grows clearer. The ground hums faintly, steady and deliberate, as though something deep within the building has awakened. Then the gears begin to turn. They move slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, steel teeth sliding into place with a heavy, grinding sound. The sound travels through the walls, resonating in the chest rather than the ears. No power lines feed the mill. No motors run. No lights flicker on. Yet the gears rotate, one engaging another, transferring motion across the entire structure. Dust shakes loose from beams. Fine particles drift downward in the dim light. The mill feels alive in a way that is difficult to define. Visitors who remain inside at night report feeling the vibration under their feet. It travels through the soles of shoes, up the legs, and into the spine. Standing still makes it more noticeable. Sitting or crouching intensifies it. The sensation is not painful, but it is insistent, as if the building is communicating through motion rather than sound. Corridors begin to feel different as the gears turn. Passageways that seemed straightforward during the day stretch longer than expected. Corners repeat themselves. Doors lead back into familiar rooms no matter which direction is taken. Panic does not arrive immediately. At first, the repetition feels like a mistake, a lapse in attention. People retrace their steps carefully, marking walls, counting turns. But the marks do not help. Corridors shift subtly, not in appearance, but in perception. Time thins. The grinding of gears remains constant throughout. It never grows louder. The sound becomes a background presence, steady enough to fade from conscious thought, yet impossible to escape. The vibration beneath the floor provides a rhythm that footsteps begin to match without intention. Some visitors report the sensation of being guided rather than lost. They feel pulled forward by the motion, encouraged to keep walking, to keep searching. The mill does not block them. It offers endless paths, all similar, all leading deeper. The idea of an exit feels abstract, less important than continuing to move. Those who stop walking often feel disoriented. Standing still causes the vibration to feel stronger, more focused. The building seems to lean inward. Walls feel closer. The air thickens, heavy with sound and motion. Restarting movement brings brief relief, encouraging continuation. Eventually, the gears slow. The grinding fades gradually, like a machine powering down. The vibration recedes into the floor. Silence returns, deep and sudden. With it comes clarity. Corridors straighten. Distances shorten. Doors lead where they should. Visitors find exits quickly once the motion stops. Stepping outside feels abrupt, like waking from deep sleep. Night air rushes in. Sound returns to normal. The mill stands dark and still behind them, showing no sign of movement. Time outside often does not match time inside. Those who believe they wandered for minutes discover hours have passed. Others who feel trapped for an entire night find only a short span has elapsed. Watches and phones offer conflicting information, as though the mill disrupts more than space alone. Local stories frame the mill as unfinished. The gears, they say, were built to run continuously, meant to turn day and night without rest. When the mill closed, the motion had nowhere to go. The structure held onto it, releasing it only in brief cycles, as if completing work that never truly ended. The repeating corridors are described not as traps, but as loops of process. The mill does not punish or pursue. It simply operates. Movement creates movement. Searching creates more searching. Only when the system completes its cycle does release occur. Those who return often feel the effects sooner. The vibration rises earlier. The sense of repetition arrives quickly. Some choose to leave before nightfall. Others stay deliberately, drawn by curiosity or the strange calm that comes from surrendering to the rhythm. Silent Gear Mill remains standing, its exterior unchanged, its interior waiting. By day, it is a hollow shell filled with still machinery. By night, it becomes something else entirely, a place where motion resumes without power. Where space folds into patterns, and where time slips sideways. When the gears turn, the mill remembers what it was built to do. And for those inside, the experience lingers long after they leave. In the faint sensation of vibration beneath their feet. And the unsettling thought that some systems never truly stop, even when the world moves on. Crossbeam Paper Mill stands at the edge of a forgotten industrial zone, its broken outline visible long before the road reaches it. The structure is vast and hollow, its outer walls scarred by time and neglect. Windows gape open, their frames bent and rusted. During the day, sunlight pours through these openings, illuminating a landscape of fallen beams and warped floors inside. The mill once processed endless rolls of paper, its machinery humming day and night. Now it sits silent, its purpose erased, its interior collapsed inward. Thick wooden beams lie scattered across the floors, some snapped cleanly, others twisted where they fell. Dust coats everything, softening sharp edges and muting color. Visitors entering the mill often feel unease immediately. The air inside feels heavier than outside, carrying a stale scent of old wood, damp concrete, and something faintly metallic. Sound behaves strangely here. Footsteps echo too long, then vanish abruptly. Even quiet movement seems amplified, as if the building is listening. Collapsed beams dominate the interior. Then the sounds begin. A sharp crack echoes from somewhere overhead, sudden and loud enough to startle even prepared visitors. People freeze, scanning the ceiling for movement. Dust drifts down from above, catching the light as it falls. Moments later, another sound follows. A dull thud reverberates through the structure, as if debris has fallen onto a lower level. The noise travels through the beams and concrete, felt faintly in the feet. Yet when visitors look, nothing appears to have changed. No new collapse. No shifting pile. The mill remains frozen. Cracking wood. Falling debris. Always above, always out of sight. The timing feels deliberate, spaced just far enough apart to keep nerves tight. Each sound suggests imminent collapse, yet nothing ever fully gives way. As people move deeper into the mill, the atmosphere grows more oppressive. The air thickens, making breathing more difficult. Each breath feels shallow, as if there is less oxygen available. Some describe a pressure in the chest, not painful, but persistent. The farther inside they go, the stronger the sensation becomes. In certain areas, visitors report seeing movement among the fallen beams. Figures appear partially obscured by debris, their forms pale and indistinct. They seem pinned beneath heavy wood, arms reaching upward through gaps between beams. Their movements are slow and silent. No sound comes from them. No expression is visible, only the suggestion of effort and strain. When people blink or shift position, the figures vanish. The beams remain. The dust remains. Nothing appears disturbed. Yet the image lingers in memory with unsettling clarity. Those who witness it often describe a powerful emotional response, a sudden wave of panic or sorrow that arrives without warning. They are always trapped. As visitors move away from these areas, the air gradually becomes easier to breathe. The pressure lifts slightly, though it never disappears completely until they exit the mill. The sounds of cracking would continue, following no visible source, echoing from different levels as if the structure is replaying moments from its past. Local accounts suggest the mill experienced a catastrophic collapse long ago. During its final years of operation, structural integrity was compromised by age and overuse. Heavy beams weakened over time, bearing loads they were never meant to carry indefinitely. One night, part of the structure gave way, bringing sections of the mill down in a chain reaction of falling wood and concrete. Chaos, confusion, and desperate attempts to escape collapsing floors. The site was abandoned rather than repaired, its interior left exactly as it fell. Official records are sparse, but stories passed down describe the events of that fateful night. Some believe crossbeam paper mill never moved on from that moment. The cracking sounds mirror the initial collapse, repeating endlessly within the structure. The falling debris heard overhead may be echoes of beams that once fell, replayed through memory embedded in wood and stone. The figures seen beneath beams are not new apparitions, but impressions left behind, moments frozen in time. Skeptics offer practical explanations. Old buildings settle and shift, especially after decades of exposure. Temperature changes cause wood to expand and contract, producing sharp cracks. Loose debris can fall from unseen ledges. Poor ventilation and lingering dust can make breathing difficult, triggering physical reactions amplified by fear. Yet these explanations struggle to account for the consistency. The sounds occur even on still nights. The air thickens in specific areas. The figures appear only where beams are piled heaviest. The experience feels structured, as if following a pattern rather than random decay. Those who leave the mill often do so quickly. Once outside, the air feels clean and light. Breathing returns to normal almost immediately. The sounds stop. The oppressive pressure lifts completely. From the exterior, the mill looks quiet and empty, incapable of producing what was just experienced inside. The structure looks static, frozen in decay. There is no sign of movement or sound. Yet visitors who have entered remember the weight of the air. The echo of cracking wood above them. The silent figures reaching upward beneath fallen beams. The mill does not feel abandoned to those who have been inside. It feels occupied by memory. The air thickens with the weight of what happened and what never resolved. Collapse never fully ends. Beams continue to fall without landing. Figures remain trapped without release. The air thickens with the weight of what happened and what never resolved. The mill does not seek attention. It does not call out. It simply repeats itself. Holding visitors briefly within a cycle of sound, pressure, and silence. Before letting them leave with the knowledge that some places remember their breaking point and never truly rebuild. Old stone grist mill rises from the riverbank like a block of winter trapped in time. Its walls are thick and unyielding, stacked from heavy stone that holds the cold even under summer sun. From the outside, the building appears solid and quiet, a monument to patient labor and endurance. The closer one stands, the more the temperature drops, as if the mill draws warmth inward and refuses to release it. Stepping inside deepens that sensation. The air is sharply cold, pressing against skin and breath. Sound changes immediately. Voices feel smaller. Movements feel heavier. The stone walls absorb warmth and return silence, creating a space that feels sealed off from the world outside. Light filters through narrow openings, catching dust that hangs motionless in the air. The floor is wide and open, marked by old grooves where work once repeated endlessly. Massive grinding wheels rest where they were last used, their surfaces smooth from years of contact. Even at rest, they seem heavy with expectation, as though waiting for motion to return. As though waiting for motion to return. Footsteps echo loudly here. Each step rings out far longer than it should, bouncing between stone walls with sharp clarity. The sound repeats itself, sometimes arriving a second time, slightly delayed, slightly altered. The sound appears without warning, traveling across the floor in measured rhythm. It circles the room, rising and fading, never revealing a source. When attention is focused on it, the echo stops abruptly, leaving a silence that feels dense and intentional. Dust coats the walls in thin layers. It softens the stone and dulls color, giving the mill a timeless quality. Visitors brush their hands against the surface, leaving faint trails behind. These marks should remain unchanged, but they do not. Handprints begin to appear. They form slowly, pressing into the dust as if hands are pushing from the other side of the wall. Fingers spread naturally. Palms press flat. The impressions look fresh and deliberate, appearing where moments before the surface was untouched. No movement accompanies them. No sound announces their arrival. Those who notice the handprints feel an immediate chill deepen along their spine. The marks do not fade quickly. They remain, layered over older impressions that suggest repetition. Some overlap. Some appear at different heights, as if made by people of varying size. The wall becomes a record of contact without presence. The mill grows quieter after that. Even echoes soften. The river outside feels farther away. The grinding wheels dominate the room, their size and position suddenly more noticeable. Standing near them creates a sense of imbalance, as if the space is subtly slanted toward their center. That is when the pressure begins. It arrives without warning, firm and directional, pressing against the back. The sensation is not painful at first. It feels like a hand or shoulder guiding forward, steady and insistent. Visitors stumble slightly, catching themselves as they are nudged toward the grinding wheels. The pressure vanishes the moment they move away. Those who remain close feel it again, stronger this time. The force is controlled, never violent, but unmistakable. The force is controlled, never violent, but unmistakable. It urges movement in a single direction, ignoring resistance and hesitation. It urges movement in a single direction, ignoring resistance and hesitation. The grinding wheels seem to draw attention, their presence growing heavier with each step closer. The grinding wheels seem to draw attention, their presence growing heavier with each step closer. Some describe the sensation as being positioned rather than pushed. Some describe the sensation as being positioned rather than pushed. The pressure adjusts to movement, correcting posture, guiding stance. The pressure adjusts to movement, correcting posture, guiding stance. It feels purposeful, as if the mill remembers how bodies were meant to stand and where they were meant to be. It feels purposeful, as if the mill remembers how bodies were meant to stand and where they were meant to be. Fear rises slowly, mixing with confusion, as the idea of choice begins to feel less certain. Visitors who retreat feel the pressure release immediately. Stepping back restores balance. Breath returns to normal. The cold remains, but the sense of force lifts. Those who turn away notice that echoes and handprints fade slightly, as though the mill loses interest once distance is restored. The grinding wheels remain still. They never move on their own. They do not turn or shake. Their power lies in suggestion rather than action. The mill does not need motion to enforce memory. It relies on space, sound, and subtle force to remind visitors where danger once lived. Those who stay longer report heightened awareness. They instinctively avoid certain areas. Paths through the room become clear without explanation. The mill seems to communicate through discomfort rather than instruction. Teaching through sensation rather than words. Time behaves differently inside. Minutes stretch. Silence feels longer. The cold never adapts to presence. It remains sharp and constant, reinforcing the sense that the building exists outside ordinary rhythm. Eventually, most visitors leave. Crossing the threshold back into daylight brings relief. Warmth returns gradually. Sound regains its natural shape. Looking back, the mill appears unchanged, its stone walls quiet and still. Yet the experience lingers. People recall the weight of echoes, the sight of handprints forming without touch, and the sudden pressure guiding them toward danger. The memory feels physical, carried in muscle and breath rather than thought alone. Locals speak of the mill with careful respect. They remember its history as a place where attention mattered, where mistakes carried immediate consequences. The grinding wheels demanded focus. The stone walls witnessed years of labor where carelessness was not forgiven. The mill has not forgotten that purpose. It does not seek harm. It enforces awareness. The cold, the echoes, the handprints, and the pressure all serve the same function. They remind those who enter that this was once a place where survival depended on vigilance. Sound returns without movement. Touch appears without contact. Force guides without form. The mill does not chase visitors out. It teaches them to leave. And as its stone walls continue to hold the cold of countless seasons, it waits patiently, preserving the rules of another time, ready to remind the next visitor that some places still remember exactly how dangerous they were meant to be. Raven Run Mill stands at the edge of a narrow valley, its stone and timber frame leaning slightly with age. The surrounding land is quiet, bordered by low trees and uneven ground where grass struggles to grow. By day, the mill appears empty and inactive, its broken windows dark and its doors hanging stiff on rusted hinges. Wind moves freely through the structure, carrying dust and leaves across the floor. As dusk approaches, the atmosphere around the mill begins to change. Black birds gather along the nearby trees and the mill's roofline. The birds arrive in steady numbers as the light fades. Their feathers blend with the shadows, making it difficult to count how many have come. They perch closely together, facing inward toward the building rather than outward toward the valley. Their cries begin softly, then build. The sound echoes through the broken windows and open gaps in the walls, multiplying as it bounces through empty rooms. Each call seems to linger longer than expected, overlapping with the next until the air fills with layered noise. The mill amplifies the sound, turning individual cries into a continuous presence that surrounds the structure. Visitors who arrive near sunset often pause at the edge of the property, unsettled by the volume and direction of the noise. The birds do not scatter when approached. They remain fixed in place, watching, their cries rising and falling in uneven waves. As darkness settles fully, the birds shift. Some lift into the air briefly, circling the mill before settling again. Others disappear through broken windows and gaps in the roof. The sound of wings follows, sharp and close, echoing inside enclosed rooms where no birds should be able to move freely. Those who enter the mill at night describe hearing flapping wings above and behind them. Even in rooms with intact ceilings. The sound travels quickly from one space to another. As if the birds pass through walls rather than around them. There is no collision, no sudden burst of feathers. Only controlled movement and steady rhythm. The cries from outside continue. But they are joined by quieter sounds within. Soft shifting above the rafters. Light taps against wood. The mill feels occupied in a way that does not match its appearance. Looking upward reveals long beams crossing the ceiling, coated in dust and shadow. In the dim light, shapes appear perched along these rafters. They are darker than the surrounding darkness, outlined only by the absence of light rather than its reflection. They do not move when observed. They do not react to sound or light. They remain silent, watching from their elevated positions. Their presence is felt more strongly than seen. Standing beneath them produces a subtle pressure, as though the air itself weighs more in those spaces. Movement slows. Breathing becomes more noticeable. The sense of being observed sharpens, even when the figures fade back into shadow. The birds outside continue their calls, but the sound now feels coordinated, almost deliberate. It rises when someone moves deeper into the mill. It softens when movement stops. The mill seems to respond to attention, amplifying certain sounds while dampening others. Some visitors attempt to leave quickly, unsettled by the sensation of being watched from above. As they move toward exits, the flapping inside intensifies, passing overhead in fast, controlled bursts. The sound follows them until they reach open air. Stepping outside does not immediately bring relief. The birds remain gathered, their cries continuing into the night. They do not block paths or approach directly, but their presence feels like a boundary. The mill behind them looms darker than before, its windows reflecting faint movement that disappears when stared at directly. Local accounts suggest Raven Run Mill was once a place of constant activity. Workers moved through it from dawn until nightfall, climbing ladders, crossing beams, and operating machinery. And operating machinery that filled the air with noise. The upper levels were rarely empty, always occupied by motion and watchful eyes. The mill closed, the activity stopped suddenly. Tools were left where they were last used. Pathways remained worn into the floor. The structure stood unchanged while the valley grew quiet around it. Some believe the birds are drawn to the mill because of this sudden silence. Ravens and similar birds are known to gather where change has occurred, where routines have broken and spaces have been abandoned. Their presence at dusk feels less like coincidence and more like response. Others suggest the shadowy figures reflect habits formed over years of work. Shapes remembered by the building itself, replayed without awareness. Now they hold only impressions, dark outlines that observe without action. What unsettles most visitors is the sense of coordination. The birds arrive at the same time each evening. The cries follow the same patterns. The cries follow the same patterns. The flapping inside occurs only after darkness falls. The flapping inside occurs only after darkness falls. The figures appear only when attention is drawn upward, as if acknowledging observation rather than initiating it. The figures appear only when attention is drawn upward, as if acknowledging observation rather than initiating it. As the night deepens, activity slowly decreases. The birds settle into longer silences between calls. Flapping inside the mill becomes less frequent. The shadowy figures grow harder to distinguish, blending fully into the beams and rafters until they are no longer visible at all. By early morning, the mill returns to stillness. The birds are gone. The cries have faded. The interior stands empty once more, filled only with dust and the sound of wind passing through broken windows. Those who leave Raven Run Mill often carry a lingering awareness with them. They remember the echoing cries, the sound of wings where no birds should be, and the feeling of eyes watching from above. The mill remains standing, quiet and unattended by day. Yet each evening, as dusk settles and black birds gather once more, the valley fills with sound. At Raven Run Mill, night does not bring rest. It brings watchers to the rafters, wings in enclosed rooms, and cries that echo long after the light has gone, reminding all who pass that some place is never truly empty. East Fork Cotton Mill rises beside the river like a paused machine, its tall windows dark and unblinking. Brick walls stretch long and straight, built to contain motion that no longer exists. The water outside moves steadily, but inside the mill, sound has been stripped away. Where engines once roared and belts screamed, there is now a quiet so complete it feels deliberate. Visitors notice the silence immediately. It is not the peaceful quiet of abandonment, but something sharper. Every step echoes too clearly. Every breath sounds louder than it should. The vast interior seems to absorb noise and return it altered, thinner, as if the building is listening rather than responding. The mill was once defined by sound. Machinery ran without pause. Wheels spun. Frames shook. Voices rose to be heard over the constant clatter. The walls learned this rhythm over decades, holding vibration and motion in their brick and steel. When the machine stopped, the sound did not leave all at once. Now, the quiet presses in. Those who linger inside the mill often begin to hear something beneath it. A low humming, faint and steady, drifting from the walls themselves. It does not come from a single direction. It seeps through the space, rising from pillars, corners, and sealed rooms. The hum feels mechanical, but unfinished. It carries no melody, no recognizable pattern. Just a steady tone that rises and falls slightly, as if adjusting to pressure. Visitors place their hands against the walls and swear they can feel it, a subtle vibration under the brick, too gentle to rattle, too consistent to ignore. Fine fibers float through the air. They drift slowly, catching faint light from broken windows. Thin strands, pale and weightless, moving as though carried by a breeze that cannot be felt. Visitors brush at their sleeves and hair, assuming dust or insulation, yet the fibers cling briefly before slipping away. There is no fabric left in the mill. Storage rooms stand empty. Floors are bare. Machines have been removed or left stripped of belts and cloth. Yet the fibers continue to appear, collecting briefly in corners, drifting across open floors, then dissolving into nothing. The air begins to feel crowded. Movement at the edges of vision becomes common. Not shapes, but shifts. The sense that something is passing just out of view. The hum deepens slightly, resonating through the chest rather than the ears. Breathing slows without intention. When lights are low, the sensation changes. In the dark, some visitors feel a tug at their clothing. It is gentle at first. A small pull at a sleeve. A brush against the hem of a shirt. Enough to be noticed, not enough to cause alarm. Most assume it is fabric catching on debris or air movement from a doorway. Then it happens again. This time firmer. More deliberate. A pull that comes from behind or beside, never from directly ahead. The contact never lasts long, leaving behind a strange awareness of proximity. The darkness feels closer, pressing in from all sides. The hum continues, unchanged, as though indifferent to reaction. Fibers drift through beams of flashlight, thickening briefly, then thinning again. Some describe the sensation as being measured. Not grabbed. Not restrained. Simply tested. The tug feels purposeful, as if something is checking resistance, confirming presence. The instinct to leave becomes strong and immediate. Attempts to stay calm grow difficult. Heartbeats feel louder. The mill seems larger than before, its corridors stretching farther than expected. Footsteps echo with delay, returning from directions that do not match the path taken. Those who turn back toward the exit often feel another pull. Not enough to stop them, but enough to be noticed. A final touch at the shoulder or back, light and fleeting. Once outside, the sensation disappears completely. By daylight, the mill feels different. Sunlight breaks the illusion, flattening shadows and revealing empty space clearly. The hum fades to nothing. Fibers no longer drift through the air. Visitors returning in daylight often doubt what they felt at night, convinced that darkness and imagination filled the gaps. Yet some evidence remains. Clothing brought inside is often coated with fine lint afterward, despite no visible source. Pockets contain fibers that vanish when examined closely. The smell of old cotton lingers faintly on skin and fabric, clean but stale. Locals speak about the mill with familiarity. They say the building never forgot its purpose. That the work done there shaped the space as much as brick and steel. According to them, the hum is the mill remembering motion. The fibers are echoes of material once everywhere. The tugging hands are not hands at all, but habits without bodies. Animals avoid the interior. Birds do not nest inside the upper beams. Rodents skirt the outer walls but do not enter. Insects disappear quickly after dusk, leaving the mill surrounded by an unnatural stillness. Broken only by the river outside. That the work done there shaped the space as much as brick and steel. Those who leave East Fork Cotton Mill often carry the experience with them. They feel phantom tugs at home, brief and faint. They hear low humming in quiet rooms that stops when noticed. Clothing snags unexpectedly, as if touched by something unseen. The mill remains standing, empty and intact. Its silence is not absence, but compression. The machines are gone. The fabric is gone. The workers are gone. But the mill still works in its own way. It hums softly in the dark. It releases fibers that should not exist. It reaches out, not to harm, but to remind. East Fork Cotton Mill does not ask visitors to stay. It only asks that they remember how loud it once was. And how quiet it has become. Deep Will Mill stands on uneven ground where the earth dips subtly, as if the land itself has settled over something heavy beneath it. From the outside, the structure looks like many abandoned industrial buildings. Thick stone walls. Narrow windows. A broad roof built to shelter long years of labor. Nothing about its exterior suggests how far downward it extends. Beneath the main floor lies a network of shafts and chambers carved deep into the ground. This was where the largest machinery was housed, enormous wheels and linked mechanisms designed to turn continuously, driven by forces hidden from view. Workers once moved above while motion thundered beneath their feet, unseen but always present. By day, the mill feels hollow. Visitors step carefully across cracked flooring and peer through rusted railings. Floor grates punctuate the rooms at regular intervals, thick iron lattices set into the stone. Looking down through them reveals only darkness. Light drops away quickly, swallowed by depth. The air inside is cool even in warm weather, carrying the faint scent of damp metal and stone. Sound behaves strangely here, flattening footsteps and stretching echoes until they seem to linger longer than expected. As evening approaches, the atmosphere changes. A low sound begins to rise from below the floor. It starts as a distant vibration, barely audible, more felt than heard. The sensation travels upward through the structure, vibrating beams and walls. As night settles fully, the sound sharpens into a steady grind. The machinery below has awakened. The grinding is slow and deliberate, like massive components engaging one another far beneath the surface. It does not rush. It does not falter. Each movement sounds heavy, final, as though the earth itself is turning. The sensation is rhythmic, repeating with patient consistency. Cold air begins to rush upward through the grates. It pours from the darkness below in sudden waves, sharp and dry, carrying the chill of deep earth. The temperature drop is immediate. Breath fogs in front of faces. Skin tightens. The air feels old, untouched by surface warmth. The cold does not dissipate. It pulses upward in time with the grinding below. Those who crouch to listen more closely feel the cold push against their faces, carrying faint traces of sound that do not quite reach clarity. Then come the sightings. Visitors who linger near open shafts report seeing shapes within the darkness. At first, they appear as shifting patches of shadow, easily dismissed as imagination reacting to poor light. But when eyes adjust, details begin to form. They are pale and indistinct, hovering just beyond the reach of light. Features are blurred, softened by distance and shadow, yet unmistakably human in outline. They simply stare upward, motionless, as though watching the world above from a place that cannot be reached. The faces do not blink. They do not speak. They do not react when noticed. When visitors move closer to the edge of a shaft, the faces remain fixed, unchanging, offering no response beyond their steady gaze. Those who step back report a sudden relief, as if pressure has lifted from the chest. The cold air weakens slightly. The grinding seems less intrusive. Looking again into the shaft often reveals nothing but darkness. The mill never feels aggressive. Despite the sounds and sensations, there is no sense of pursuit or threat. The faces do not beckon or retreat. They remain passive, as if bound to observation rather than action. Minutes stretch unpredictably. Watches behave inconsistently. Local accounts describe the underground machinery as unfinished. The wheels were designed to turn constantly, converting deep pressure into surface motion. When operations ceased, the mechanisms were never fully dismantled. The ground closed around them, sealing their movement below, leaving only the echoes to rise. According to these stories, the faces are not intruders. They are impressions left behind by those who once worked beneath the mill, spending long hours in darkness, watching gauges and listening for changes in sound. Over time, their attention imprinted itself into the space, lingering in the same positions they once occupied. The cold air, they say, is simply the breath of the earth moving through its own cavities, stirred by wheels that never fully stopped. Eventually, the grinding slows. The vibration fades into stillness. Cold air retreats back into the shafts. Silence settles heavily over the mill, sudden and complete. The faces vanish without transition, leaving nothing behind. Visitors often leave quickly once the sounds stop. Stepping outside feels like surfacing from deep water. Warmth returns. Normal sound resumes. The world feels loud and unstable by comparison. Looking back, the mill appears unchanged. Dark. Empty. Inert. Deep-well mill remains sealed to casual observation, its greatest movements hidden below ground. By night, it is a conduit between surface and depth, allowing motion, cold, and memory to rise briefly before sinking back down. Those who have stood above the turning wheels often carry the sensation with them. A faint vibration remembered in the bones. The echo of grinding heard in quiet moments. The image of faces watching patiently from below, not asking to be seen, but never fully disappearing. The earth beneath the mill continues its slow work. And deep below, the wheels turn on, unseen, waiting for night to return. Broken chain steel mill rises from an abandoned industrial district, its massive frame silhouetted against a sky that seems too wide for such a place. Rusted walls and broken windows mark decades of neglect, yet the structure still feels solid, as if refusing to collapse. By day, it appears empty and lifeless, a relic of heavy labor and constant motion now locked in stillness. Inside, the scale of the mill becomes clear. Wide halls stretch into darkness, their concrete floors cracked and stained. Overhead, thick chains hang from beams and hooks, some coiled, others dangling freely. They once served practical purposes, lifting steel and guiding machinery. Now they remain suspended, unmoving, like reminders of work that never fully ended. Visitors often remark on the silence during daylight. The mill absorbs sound. Footsteps echo briefly, then vanish. Voices feel small and misplaced within the vast interior. Dust floats in shafts of light, settling slowly on chains and rails. Nothing appears to move, and yet the space feels charged, as if waiting. Shadows deepen across the floors, pooling beneath hanging chains and heavy machinery. The air cools rapidly, carrying a faint metallic scent. The mill seems to grow larger in darkness, its corridors stretching farther than they should. Sound behaves differently, lingering and bending around corners. After full nightfall, the chains begin to move. At first, the motion is subtle. A gentle sway passes through a few links, barely noticeable. Then comes the sound. A low clank echoes through the hall, metal striking metal with a hollow ring. Another chain answers from farther away, then another, until the mill fills with uneven rhythm. The chains sway without wind. They rock slowly, as if disturbed by an unseen force, their shadows sliding across the walls and floor. The clanking grows louder, sharper, filling the space with cold resonance. Each movement feels deliberate, not chaotic. The chains never collide wildly. They swing just enough to be heard, as if marking time. Soon, a new sound joins the chorus. A dragging noise carries across the concrete floor, heavy and persistent. It moves slowly, scraping across the surface with steady pressure. The sound travels along corridors, disappears briefly, then returns from another direction. Visitors instinctively turn toward it, expecting to see machinery shifting or debris moving. Nothing is there. The dragging continues, tracing a path through the mill that suggests weight and restraint. It never accelerates. It never stops abruptly. It moves with purpose, echoing off walls and pillars, filling the darkness with tension. In certain areas, shapes begin to form. Figures appear at the edge of vision, bound in shadow. Their outlines are vague but unmistakably human. Their outlines are vague but unmistakably human. They move slowly through the halls, their forms partially obscured by hanging chains and darkness. They move slowly through the halls, their forms partially obscured by hanging chains and darkness. No faces are visible. No faces are visible. No details stand out. Only motion, deliberate and restrained. Only motion, deliberate and restrained. The figures do not approach. The figures do not approach. They pass between columns and machinery, following routes that mirror old work paths. They pass between columns and machinery, following routes that mirror old work paths. Chains sway as they pass, reacting as if brushed aside. Chains sway as they pass, reacting as if brushed aside. The dragging sound often follows close behind them, reinforcing the sense of weight and confinement. The dragging sound often follows close behind them, reinforcing the sense of weight and confinement. Those who witness the figures describe a heavy emotional response. Those who witness the figures describe a heavy emotional response. The presence feels restrained rather than aggressive. The figures do not reach out or acknowledge observers. They move as if focused on a task they cannot complete, bound by invisible limits. Fear gives way to a deeper unease, a sense of witnessing something unfinished. The chains sway more noticeably near these paths. The clanking grows louder, then softer, matching the slow pace of the figures. The air feels thicker, pressing against the chest and making breathing feel labored. Time seems to stretch, minutes passing without clear measure. Local accounts offer insight into the mill's past. Broken chain steel mill once operated around the clock. Workers relied on chains to guide molten steel, secure heavy loads, and control massive equipment. The work was dangerous, demanding constant awareness and coordination. Chains remained hanging, loads removed but systems never fully dismantled. The mill closed its doors, but the infrastructure stayed, frozen in the positions it last held. Some believe the mill remembers its final days. The chains, once in constant motion, retained the rhythm of labor. At night, when temperatures shift and the structure settles, those rhythms resurface. The clanking echoes the movements that once defined the space. The dragging sound reflects effort without release. The figures, according to belief, are not intruders. They are impressions of those who worked here, bound to routines and constraints that never resolved. Their slow movement through the halls mirrors tasks repeated endlessly, stripped of purpose but unable to stop. Skeptics suggest natural explanations. Metal contracts and expands with temperature changes, causing chains to move and clank. Loose debris can scrape across floors due to subtle vibrations. Darkness and expectation can shape shadows into recognizable forms. Yet those who spend time inside the mill at night describe patterns too precise to dismiss. The chains move in response to presence. The dragging sound follows consistent routes. The figures appear only in specific corridors and vanish as suddenly as they arrive. The experience feels orchestrated rather than random. As dawn approaches, the activity fades. The chains slow, then hang still once more. The clanking ceases, leaving behind a silence that feels vast and heavy. The dragging sound retreats into nothing. The figures dissolve into shadow, leaving the halls empty. By morning, broken chain steel mill looks unchanged. Chains hang motionless. Floors are quiet. Dust settles undisturbed. Sunlight reveals rust, wear, and abandonment, but nothing else. The mill appears inert, incapable of producing the night's disturbances. Those who leave often do so quietly, reluctant to speak until distance softens memory. They remember the sway of chains without wind. The sound of weight dragged across concrete. The slow movement of bound figures passing through darkness. Broken chain steel mill remains where it stands, silent by day, but alive with memory after dark, repeating the motions of a place that never truly learned how to rest. White dust feed mill stands at the edge of open farmland, its tall silos and low processing buildings bleached by years of sun and wind. From a distance it looks quiet, even abandoned, but the moment visitors step inside, the air tells a different story. A fine white powder floats everywhere, suspended and slow, catching light in drifting layers that never seem to settle. The dust is impossible to ignore. It coats railings, floors, and machinery in a soft, pale film. Each step stirs it into motion again, lifting clouds that hang longer than expected. Breathing becomes difficult almost immediately. Throats tighten. Lungs burn. Visitors cough hard and often, the sound echoing sharply through the wide interior. Even after stepping back outside, the coughing lingers. The dust feels heavier than ordinary grain powder, as though it resists leaving the body once inhaled. Some describe the sensation as breathing through cloth, air present but restricted. Inside the mill, sound behaves strangely. Voices seem muted, swallowed by the drifting white. Footsteps lose their edge, softened by layers of powder on the floor. The whispers begin. They are faint at first, barely audible beneath coughing and movement. They are faint at first, barely audible beneath coughing and movement. The whispers do not come from any single direction. The whispers do not come from any single direction. They move, sliding through the air, circling and overlapping. The whispers grow clearer when attention is given to them. They rise and fall like breath, carrying rhythm without language. Each voice feels close, just beyond hearing, brushing against awareness without fully revealing itself. The dust thickens where the whispers gather. It swirls gently, drawn into slow currents that form and dissolve without cause. Shapes begin to emerge within these clouds, subtle and fleeting. At first they look like simple disturbances, areas where light bends differently. Then faces appear. They form briefly in the air, features suggested by shadow and movement rather than detail. Eyes hollowed by absence. Mouths half-shaped, as if caught between speaking and silence. Those who see them often doubt themselves. Blinking clears nothing. The dust remains thick, alive with motion. When the faces appear again, they are different, forming in new places, never repeating exactly. Some appear close enough to feel, others farther away, watching from between beams and machinery. The whispers intensify after that. They weave through the space, layered and persistent. Standing still makes them louder. Movement scatters them briefly, but they return as soon as the dust settles again. The mill feels crowded despite the absence of people, filled with presence carried on air rather than bodies. Breathing becomes more difficult. The powder seems to respond to attention, growing denser where visitors linger. Coughing fits grow harsher, forcing people to bend forward, hands on knees, eyes watering. The dust does not clear with motion. Some report feeling touched. A brush against the arm. A light pressure against the shoulder. The sensation is fleeting, easily mistaken for drifting powder, yet it carries intention. The air feels aware, shifting to accommodate those who move through it. Machinery stands silent throughout. Old conveyors, grinders, and chutes remain still, coated in white. Nothing turns. Nothing hums. Yet the mill feels active, as if work continues on a level not visible. The whispers rise near these machines, pooling around them before dispersing again. Those who remain too long feel overwhelmed. The combination of restricted breathing, sound, and movement presses inward. Thoughts slow. Focus narrows. The dust becomes the dominant presence, filling vision and lungs, shaping experience entirely. Some describe a growing sense that leaving will become difficult if delayed. Stepping outside brings partial relief. Fresh air clears the worst of the coughing, but the sensation does not disappear immediately. The whispers fade with distance, yet their memory lingers. The dust remains clinging to skin and clothing, carried beyond the mill as if unwilling to let go. Looking back, the building appears unchanged. Sunlight reflects off pale surfaces. Doors stand open and still. No movement is visible inside. They remember years of constant motion, grain moving endlessly, powder filling the air without pause. The mill was never truly clean. Dust settled everywhere, breathed by everyone. Work continued despite the air, day after day, season after season. That the powder remembers voices raised over machinery, conversations shouted through clouds of white. When the work stopped, the dust remained, suspended, carrying fragments of sound and shape with it. The faces seen in the air are never solid. They do not linger. They do not approach. They appear only long enough to be noticed, then return to powder, as though forming requires effort and cannot be sustained. The whispers serve the same purpose, reminders rather than messages. White dust feed mill does not trap visitors. It overwhelms them. The air fills every space, leaving little room for comfort or clarity. The experience demands retreat, urging those inside to seek clean air and distance. Those who leave carry the memory with them. They recall the sound of coughing echoing through white haze. The feeling of whispers brushing past awareness. The sight of faces forming and dissolving without substance. The dust remains inside the mill, thick and waiting. It drifts endlessly, reshaping itself with every disturbance, holding sound, suggestion, and presence within its fine grains. And when new visitors step through the doors, breathing deeply before the coughing begins, the air stirs once more, ready to speak, ready to show itself, if only for a moment. Before returning to white silence, Hollow River Mill rests beside a slow-moving stretch of water that bends gently around its foundation. The river rarely appears threatening. Its surface slides past with quiet patience, reflecting sky and trees in long, broken lines. Yet the mill's walls tell a different story. Dark water stains climb high along the brick, marking years of flooding that return again and again. By day, the mill feels damp and hollow. The air carries the scent of wet stone and old wood. Floors remain slick even when the river sits low. Sunlight filters through cracked windows, illuminating patches of moisture that never seem to dry. The building stands in a constant state of recovery, as if it never fully empties of the river that visits it so often. As evening approaches, the sound begins. Water drips steadily from ceilings and beams, falling into unseen puddles below. The dripping grows louder. The mill amplifies the sound, turning each drop into a soft echo that travels through the structure. The river outside continues its quiet flow, but inside, the building feels submerged even when the floor remains dry. The air thickens with moisture, and breath feels heavier, cooler. Visitors often mistake the first sounds for imagination. A splash echoes somewhere nearby, sharper than the dripping. Then another follows, farther away, then closer again. The splashes carry the weight of movement, distinct from falling water. They come in pairs, separated by short pauses, like footsteps crossing a shallow surface. Listening closely reveals direction. The splashing moves along hallways and through doorways, following paths once walked by workers. The sound approaches, slows, then stops. Silence fills the space briefly, broken only by dripping. Then the splashing resumes elsewhere, continuing its steady progress through the mill. Those who turn corners to investigate often see nothing at first. The rooms appear empty, floors damp but undisturbed. Then, at the edges of light, shapes begin to form. Figures stand near doorways or against walls, barely outlined by reflected glow. They appear soaked, their forms blurred as if seen through water even when standing in open air. These figures do not rush or retreat. They remain still, facing inward, as though pausing mid-task. Their presence feels temporary, as if they might dissolve at any moment. When approached, they fade slowly, thinning until only empty space remains. The puddles are cold to the touch, clear, and unconnected to any visible leak. The dripping continues uninterrupted. Some visitors report hearing voices mixed into the sound of water. Not words, but breathy murmurs layered beneath the dripping and splashing. The sound resembles conversation heard through walls, indistinct and overlapping. It rises and falls with the rhythm of the river outside. Lower rooms sit closer to the river level, their floors permanently stained and warped. In these areas, the air feels colder. The splashing footsteps are louder, more frequent, echoing sharply off stone and metal. Figures appear more clearly here, standing ankle-deep in water that vanishes as soon as attention shifts. Doorways become focal points. Visitors describe seeing figures pause in thresholds, water dripping from their clothing, pooling at their feet. They never cross fully into the next room. They stand as if uncertain, caught between spaces, leaving damp footprints that stop abruptly and go no farther. Attempts to follow the footprints always fail. They fade within minutes, absorbed by the already wet floor. No trail leads outward. No exit is ever reached. Local accounts explain the Milla's relationship with the river. For decades, the river powered its machinery, turning wheels and filling channels beneath the floor. Floods were common, sometimes sudden, sometimes slow. Workers learned to move through rising water, adjusting routines without stopping production. The river was an accepted presence, unpredictable but necessary. When the mill finally closed, the river did not change its behavior. Floods continued. Water entered the building, receded, and returned again. The structure absorbed the cycle, holding moisture deep within its walls and floors. Some believe the mill never truly dried out, not physically, and not in memory. What visitors experience at night feels less like haunting and more like repetition. The splashing footsteps follow routes learned long ago. The splashing becomes less frequent. Figures appear more faintly, their outlines dissolving faster than before. The dripping remains, steady and patient, as if marking time rather than movement. By early morning, the mill returns to near silence. Puddles remain where none should be, scattered across floors and near doorways. The air smells strongly of river water. Sunlight reveals nothing out of place, nothing that explains the sounds of the night. Those who leave Hollow River Mill often do so quietly, unsettled by the sense of intrusion rather than fear. The experience feels ongoing, as if they witnessed only a portion of a cycle that will continue whether observed or not. The river flows on beside the mill, unchanged and unconcerned. Floods will come again. Water will fill the building and retreat. Dripping will echo through empty rooms. At Hollow River Mill, night brings movement shaped by water and memory. The mill does not resist the river. It accepts it, again and again, allowing the past to surface quietly with each drop that falls in the dark. Iron Ladder Mill rises in narrow tiers beside a dry channel, its brick face cut by tall windows that no longer hold glass. Inside, the space is dominated by height. Floors stack upward in long shadows, connected by iron ladders bolted into beams and walls. The ladders are old, darkened by use and time, their rungs worn smooth where hands once climbed without pause. By day, the mill feels empty but stable. Light pours through broken panes and settles in pale columns across the central shaft, a vertical opening that drops from the highest level to the ground floor below. The shaft is wide and uninterrupted, a clean line of depth that draws the eye downward and makes distance difficult to judge. Sound behaves oddly here, slipping up and down with ease, returning late and softened. Footsteps ring against metal and concrete, echoing through levels above and below. When evening approaches, the building changes. Light thins. Shadows stretch along the shaft. The ladders fade into vertical lines of darkness, their rungs barely visible without direct light. It is during these hours that people begin to hear movement above them. Climbing sounds. A slow, deliberate rhythm of metal touched and released. The faint scrape of boots against rungs. The hollow ring of iron responding to weight. The sound travels downward through the shaft, passing overhead even when no one is visible on the upper floors. Those who hear it often stop moving. They tilt their heads, listening. The sound continues for a few seconds, then pauses, as if the climber has stopped to rest. When visitors call out, there is no response. When they shine lights upward, the ladders remain empty, stretching into darkness without motion. The climbing resumes. Sometimes it moves upward, rung by rung. Other times it descends, steady and unhurried. The rhythm never rushes. It feels practiced, familiar, as if repeating a task performed countless times before. As the sound passes directly overhead, some visitors experience a sudden sensation. A grip at the ankles. It is brief but unmistakable. Fingers closing around fabric or skin from below, tugging downward with controlled force. The contact does not pull hard enough to cause a fall. It releases almost immediately, leaving behind a cold shock that travels upward through the legs. Those who feel it often freeze. Heartbeats race. Balance falters for a moment. The instinct to grab the nearest railing or ladder becomes overwhelming. Others report the sensation without physical contact. A pressure around the ankles. The feeling of being held without touch. The central shaft draws attention next. Visitors standing at its edge often see movement within it. At first, it looks like dust or shadow slipping downward through the light. Then the shape becomes clearer. Figures falling. They drop through the shaft endlessly, passing floor after floor without impact. Their forms remain upright, arms close to their sides, faces turned forward. They do not spin or flail. They simply fall, smooth and continuous, disappearing into darkness below before reappearing above once more. The motion does not follow gravity. The figures fall too slowly, too evenly, as if the act itself is suspended in repetition. Those who watch feel immediate effects. Dizziness sets in. The world tilts slightly toward the shaft. Legs weaken. The urge to step closer becomes strong, paired with a simultaneous fear of doing so. Breathing feels shallow, as if the air near the opening is thinner than elsewhere. Looking away helps. The moment attention breaks, the figures vanish. The shaft returns to darkness and dust. Strength returns slowly, unevenly. The sensation of being watched remains, lingering in the shoulders and back. Night deepens, and the mill grows louder. Climbing sounds repeat from different ladders, sometimes overlapping. The rhythm becomes confusing, moving above and below at once. Metal rings softly, responding to weight that cannot be seen. Some visitors choose to leave at this point. They descend quickly, avoiding ladders where possible, keeping distance from the shaft. Others hesitate, unsure which direction leads out. The building seems to rearrange itself subtly, corridors stretching longer than expected, stairwells leading to unfamiliar levels. A few report seeing figures standing on ladders just beyond the reach of light. Still silhouettes gripping rungs. Heads tilted downward. Faces obscured. When approached, these figures dissolve into shadow, leaving the ladder empty and unmoving. By morning, the mill quiets. Sunlight breaks through the windows, flattening shadows and revealing the shaft clearly from top to bottom. The ladders hang still. No sounds of climbing remain. The air feels ordinary again, though the memory of movement lingers. Staff and locals speak cautiously about Iron Ladder Mill. They say the building was designed for constant motion, for bodies moving up and down without rest. The ladders were its lifelines, the shaft its spine. When the work stopped, the motion did not disappear. It folded inward, repeating itself without purpose. Animals avoid the interior after dusk. Birds do not roost near the shaft. Insects vanish from the upper floors early. The building holds a quiet that feels attentive rather than empty. Those who leave often feel phantom sensations for days. A tug at the ankle while climbing stairs. The sound of metal rung against rung in quiet rooms. The sense of height where there is none. Iron Ladder Mill remains standing, its ladders connecting floors that no longer need connection. The shaft still opens from top to bottom, waiting. At night, the climbing resumes. The falling repeats. The building continues its work without workers. It does not ask visitors to climb. It only reminds them how easily movement becomes habit. And how some habits never truly stop. Shadow Wheel Mill rises from the ground like a solid block of history, its stone walls thick and unyielding, built to contain power and motion. Long after the machinery fell silent and the workers left, the structure remained sealed against time, holding its interior in permanent dimness. By day, it appears heavy and inert, a building that absorbs light rather than reflects it. Inside, darkness behaves differently. Even with doors open and windows exposed, light seems to weaken as it travels inward. Corners dissolve into shadow within a few steps. When night arrives, the mill changes again. With no lights burning and no moonlight reaching the interior, shadows begin to appear. The shapes move slowly, sliding along stone surfaces as if following a rhythm hidden deep within the structure. What makes the shadows unsettling is their independence. They do not match the machinery, beams, or pillars around them. Long arms reach where no supports exist. Rounded forms drift past straight edges. Some shadows bend at angles that defy the geometry of the room. They overlap and separate, interacting with one another in ways that suggest intention rather than accident. Turning toward the shadows does not cause them to stop. Turning away does not make them disappear. They continue their slow motion regardless of attention. Passing behind observers. Crossing ceilings and pooling briefly near the floor. Before sliding onward. Sound offers little reassurance. The mill is quiet, but not silent. The air carries a faint pressure, a low presence that feels more like weight than noise. Voices sound muted, as though absorbed by the walls before traveling far. At the center of the mill stands the largest wheel. It dominates the main chamber, a massive circle of iron mounted vertically, its surface worn smooth by years of use. Rust darkens its edges, but the structure remains intact, balanced, and imposing. Even when everything else fades into darkness, the outline of the wheel remains visible, as if traced by absence rather than light. Many visitors report a pull toward it. The sensation begins as curiosity, a desire to stand closer, to see more clearly. As distance closes, the feeling deepens into something heavier. Steps feel guided. The floor slopes subtly, encouraging forward movement. The shadows seem to gather near the wheel, stretching and converging along its rim. Those who resist describe a physical effort required to stop. The pull does not feel aggressive. It is steady and calm, offering no urgency. Some feel relief when they reach the edge of the chamber, as if pressure has eased simply by being closer. Others turn away before reaching it. Breaking focus causes the sensation to weaken abruptly. The shadows scatter, sliding back into corners and walls. The wheel recedes into darkness, losing definition. Those who retreat often feel disoriented for several minutes, struggling to regain a sense of direction. The shadows themselves never touch. They pass over walls, floors, and ceilings, but avoid crossing directly over people. Instead, they frame them, forming outlines that feel deliberate. Some observers report seeing their own shadow behaving differently, lagging behind movements or stretching where it should not. The effect is strongest near the wheel. Here, shadows thicken, overlapping until the walls appear layered with motion. The air feels denser. Breathing slows. Time stretches, each moment unfolding with unnatural clarity. Visitors often lose track of how long they stand there, absorbed by the slow drift of shapes. Local accounts describe the wheel as the heart of the mill. It once controlled the movement of every other mechanism, dictating speed, pressure, and direction. When the mill shut down, the wheel was never dismantled. Its role remained incomplete, its influence unresolved. According to these stories, the shadows are not cast by light, but by memory. The mill remembers motion. It remembers labor. It remembers countless rotations that shaped its walls and floors. When darkness removes distraction, those memories surface as movement without substance, repeating patterns without origin. The pull toward the wheel is described not as danger, but as alignment. Standing near it places visitors at the center of the mill's awareness, where everything makes sense in relation to that point. Remaining too long, however, deepens the sensation, making departure feel increasingly distant. Eventually, the shadows fade. Without warning, movement slows and dissolves into stillness. Walls return to uniform darkness. The pressure lifts. The wheel becomes inert once more, a silent circle in a silent room. Those who leave at this moment often do so quickly. Exiting the mill feels like stepping into a brighter, louder world. Night air rushes in. Ordinary shadows reappear, tied properly to bodies and objects. The experience settles into memory, vivid and difficult to explain. Shadow Wheel Mill remains unchanged after these encounters. No marks are left behind. No evidence remains. By day, it is once again a quiet ruin filled with dust and rust. Yet those who have seen the shadows know the darkness inside is not empty. In quiet places elsewhere, they sometimes notice movement at the edge of vision. A shadow that lingers too long. A shape that bends slightly out of place. These moments pass quickly, but the recognition remains. The mill continues to stand, waiting for darkness to return. And when it does, shadows will once again move without light, shapes will drift without bodies. And the great wheel at the center will draw attention, steady and patient. Reminding anyone who enters that some structures never stop working, even when the power is gone. Old Furnace Mill stands at the edge of a forgotten industrial valley, its tall stacks rising against the dark outline of hills. By day, the mill looks silent and exhausted, a maze of brick walls, rusted railings, and cold iron doors. The furnaces sit dark and empty, their mouths sealed with ash and time. Nothing suggests warmth or movement. The place appears long abandoned, its purpose finished decades ago. As the sun fades, the mill begins to feel different. The air grows heavy inside the structure, holding a faint metallic scent that does not belong to cold stone. Shadows stretch across the furnace room, clinging to walls and settling into corners where light never quite reaches. Visitors often describe a sense of anticipation, as if the building itself is waiting for something to return. After nightfall, the first change is subtle. The first change is subtle. A low warmth radiates from the furnaces, barely noticeable at first. The stone floors feel slightly warmer beneath the feet. Standing near the furnace doors brings an unexpected sensation, like heat lingering long after a fire should have died. Hands held close to the iron panels feel warmth where none should exist. Then comes the sound. A deep roaring echoes through the mill, distant but powerful. It rises slowly, like flames being fed with fresh fuel. The sound rolls through the furnace chamber, vibrating against brick and metal. It is unmistakable, the voice of a working fire, alive and hungry. The furnaces remain dark. No flames are visible. No glow escapes the sealed openings. And yet the roar continues, swelling and falling as if controlled by unseen hands. Those inside often feel the vibration in their chest, as if standing too close to a massive blaze. Moments later, the smell arrives. Hot metal floods the air suddenly and intensely. It is sharp and unmistakable, the scent of iron heated to working temperature. Within this heat and sound, movement appears. Figures begin to form near the furnaces, glowing faintly with a dull orange light. They move with purpose, stepping between workstations and furnace mouths. Their shapes resemble workers, bent slightly forward, arms lifting and lowering in steady rhythm. Tools are suggested by motion rather than detail, as if the act of labor itself is being remembered. The figures do not acknowledge visitors. They work as if alone, focused entirely on their task. Their faces are indistinct, blurred by glow and shadow. The light within them pulses softly, brightening when they approach the furnaces and dimming as they move away. They appear unaware of the living presence sharing the space. The heat grows stronger near them. Standing too close brings a rush of warmth that feels real and immediate. The roaring intensifies, then steadies. It settles into a constant rhythm, the sound of sustained fire rather than sudden ignition. The figures continue their work without pause. They lift, turn, and adjust, repeating movements that feel deeply practiced. There is no urgency, only routine. Visitors often feel compelled to step back. The combination of heat, sound, and movement becomes overwhelming. Fear is not always the dominant emotion. More often, it is awe mixed with unease. The feeling of standing inside a moment that should no longer exist. Time seems distorted, minutes stretching into uncertainty as the mill reclaims its former purpose. Gradually, the experience begins to fade. The figures grow dimmer, their glow softening until it blends with shadow. The roaring fire quiets, lowering to a distant rumble before disappearing entirely. The heat drains from the air, leaving behind sudden cold that feels sharper by contrast. The smell of metal lingers longest, slowly thinning until only damp stone remains. Silence returns abruptly. The furnaces stand cold once more, dark and lifeless. Touching the iron doors reveals no warmth. The floors feel cool again. It is as if the mill has awakened briefly, then fallen back into dormancy. Stories surrounding Old Furnace Mill point to its intense history. At its height, the mill ran without rest. Furnaces burned day and night, fueled by constant labor. Workers moved in shifts that blurred together, their routines shaped by heat, noise, and repetition. The operations ended, the shutdown was sudden. The fires were extinguished, but the structure remained intact. Equipment was left where it stood. The furnaces cooled, but the memory of heat lingered in brick and iron that had absorbed it for years. According to belief, the mill never truly accepted the silence. Natural explanations are often suggested. The heat can retain longer than expected. The figures move with skill, repeating tasks too precise to be random. It feels like it is working. By morning, Old Furnace Mill is quiet again. Sunlight reveals empty rooms and cold furnaces. The air is still. No trace of heat remains. Visitors standing in daylight find it hard to believe what the night brought with it. But those who have felt the warmth, heard the roar, and seen the glowing workers know something lingers here. Old Furnace Mill does not remember itself as abandoned. When darkness falls and the world grows quiet, it returns to the moment that defined it. The furnaces burn without flame. The workers labor without bodies. And the mill breathes heat into the night, repeating its purpose again and again. Unaware that the living are watching. And unable to stop doing what it was built to do. Crooked Floor Mill stands at the edge of a narrow valley, its tall frame leaning slightly as if shaped by years of uneven ground. From the outside, the structure looks worn but stable, built of timber and stone meant to endure constant use. Visitors approach with curiosity, noticing nothing unusual at first beyond the quiet isolation of the place. The moment they step inside, balance changes. The floor slopes gently beneath their feet, not enough to cause alarm, but enough to be felt. Walking requires attention. Muscles adjust instinctively, compensating for angles that should not exist. The sensation is subtle, easy to dismiss as old construction or settling ground. As visitors move deeper into the mill, the slopes become harder to ignore. Floors tilt in opposing directions from one room to the next. The inner ear struggles to keep up, sending mixed signals that create a low, constant dizziness. Rooms do not behave as expected. Hallways seem longer than they should be. Corners appear farther away, stretching slightly as people walk toward them. Walls bend in perspective, narrowing and widening without pattern. Doors feel misplaced, never quite where the eye expects them to be. The disorientation grows quietly. Visitors pause often, steadying themselves, pressing a hand against the wall. The surface feels solid, unchanged, yet the sense of movement continues even when standing still. The mill seems to shift around its occupants, not through motion, but through perception. The mill seems to shift around its occupants, not through motion, but through perception. Footsteps echo unevenly, sometimes arriving from behind, sometimes from above. The direction of sound feels unreliable, bouncing in ways that do not match the space. Some begin to feel watched. Not by presence, but by the building itself. The mill seems aware of movement, responding subtly to each step. The slope underfoot adjusts just enough to guide direction, pulling visitors along paths they did not intend to take. It is easy to lose track of where one started. Walking through a sequence of rooms feels repetitive, familiar, yet slightly altered each time. Visitors swear they have passed the same beam or window before, only to realize moments later that the angle is wrong, the light different. They move with purpose, following what feels like a straight line, only to arrive back where they began. The realization brings a sudden wave of dizziness, as if the body has been tricked into following an invisible curve. Above it all, laughter echoes. It comes from higher levels of the mill, drifting down through open spaces. The sound is light and distant, almost playful, contrasting sharply with the unease below. It does not mock. It simply exists, repeating softly, never growing closer. Looking upward reveals nothing. Upper floors remain dark and still. No movement. No figures. Yet the laughter continues, appearing at irregular intervals, always just out of reach. The laughter fades when listened to directly, returning only when attention drifts elsewhere. The laughter deepens the sense of imbalance. It suggests awareness, as though something understands the confusion unfolding below. The sound never aligns with visible space, further unsettling any attempt to map the mill logically. Those who try to leave often hesitate. Finding the exit feels harder than expected. Doorways appear farther away, requiring more effort to reach. The mill does not block the way. It complicates it. Breathing becomes more deliberate. The dizziness sharpens, bringing mild nausea and pressure behind the eyes. Visitors blink frequently, trying to reset their focus. The rooms continue to stretch and bend subtly, refusing to settle into stable shapes. Some sit down to regain balance. The moment they do, the feeling intensifies. The floor beneath them seems to tilt further, encouraging them to stand and move again. Remaining still feels worse than walking, as if motion is required to maintain control. The laughter returns during these moments. It drifts from above, soft and rhythmic, never loud enough to identify emotion clearly. Eventually, most visitors find their way out. Stepping back into open air brings immediate relief. The ground outside feels solid and trustworthy. The dizziness fades slowly, leaving behind fatigue and lingering confusion. Looking back at the mill, it appears unchanged, upright and ordinary. People recall the way rooms refused to stay still, how distance felt unreliable, how sound moved independently of space. Locals describe Crooked Floor Mill as a place that plays with orientation. They say it was never built straight, and over time, the imbalance deepened. Work inside required constant adjustment, careful attention to footing and focus. Those who lost awareness risked injury, not from machinery, but from the building itself. The mill seems to remember that need. It demands attention. It punishes assumption. The dizziness, the bending rooms, and the looping paths all serve the same purpose. They strip away confidence and force presence in each step. The laughter, some say, belongs to the mill. Not a voice, but an echo of satisfaction, responding to those who surrender control and wander without awareness. It does not guide or threaten. It observes. Crooked Floor Mill still stands, waiting quietly in its valley. By day, it looks like any other abandoned structure. By night, shadows deepen its angles, making the slopes harder to judge. The building rests, patient and unchanged. Those who enter leave altered. They carry the memory of floors that refused to level, rooms that stretched beyond reason, and paths that curved without turning. They remember the sound of laughter above, distant and untraceable. The mill does not chase visitors away. And in that wandering, it reminds them how easily direction can be lost when the ground beneath their feet decides not to cooperate. Black Window Mill stands along a narrow bend of land where the ground remains permanently shaded. Its brick exterior is darkened by age and moisture, and the tall windows that once welcomed daylight now absorb it instead. Even in full sun, the glass appears black, reflecting very little of the world outside. By day, the mill feels dormant but uneasy. Wind passes through broken frames, stirring dust that never fully settles. Floors remain bare and quiet. The windows watch without returning an image, their surfaces dull and opaque, as if coated from within. Visitors often notice the windows before anything else. When standing near them, reflections appear delayed or incomplete. Faces seem dimmer in the glass. Movements return slower than expected. The effect is subtle enough to ignore at first, especially in shifting light. But the longer one remains, the harder it becomes to dismiss. The reflections begin to change. In the dark glass, scenes form that do not match the empty rooms. Shapes appear behind the viewer, standing where no one is present. They stand close, sometimes shoulder to shoulder, filling the reflected space. Looking back at the window, the figures are still there. Some reflections move independently. While the observer stands still, reflected figures shift their weight or raise their heads. Arms move slightly, as if adjusting tools that no longer exist. The movement occurs within the reflection alone. The effect is deeply unsettling. Those who notice the independent movement often feel an immediate pull to continue watching. Attention narrows. Surrounding sounds fade. The reflection becomes the only point of focus, growing darker and more detailed with sustained attention. Physical sensations follow. A dull weakness settles into the limbs, making standing feel heavier. Nausea builds gradually, not as sudden sickness, but as a slow tightening in the stomach and chest. Breathing becomes shallow. The air feels thick, as though the room has lost circulation. Some report a pressure behind the eyes, accompanied by a faint ringing in the ears. The longer the gaze remains fixed on the glass, the stronger these sensations grow. Time feels uncertain, moments stretching without clear measure. Those who manage to look away often do so with effort. Turning from the window brings immediate disorientation. Balance wavers. Vision blurs briefly. The reflected figures vanish the instant attention breaks, leaving only dark glass and an empty room behind. Recovery takes time. Sitting or stepping outside into open air helps ease the effects, though lingering weakness may persist for hours. The sense of being watched often remains, even when far from the mill. At night, the phenomenon intensifies. The mill's interior grows darker, and the windows reflect more clearly than they do during the day. Reflected scenes appear brighter against the black surface, forming quickly and with less prompting. Workers gather in larger numbers, filling the reflected rooms with quiet activity. Their faces are the most unsettling detail. Eyes lack depth. Expressions never settle into anything recognizable. Despite this, their attention feels directed outward, focused on whoever stands before the window. Some reflections appear to smile faintly. Others lean forward, closing the distance within the glass. Their movements never disturb the surface. No sound accompanies their presence. Weakness deepens into dizziness. Nausea becomes difficult to ignore. Some feel an internal pull, as though leaning forward without intending to. The reflection seems to widen, darkening around the edges, drawing attention toward its center. Those who break away in time avoid further harm, but many describe the experience as draining rather than frightening. It feels less like being attacked and more like being emptied. Local stories suggest the mill once operated with long shifts and little pause. Workers spent hours facing the same windows, watching the same motions reflected back at them while machines ran endlessly behind. Over time, reflections may have become more familiar than the outside world. When the mill closed, the machines stopped, but the habit of watching remained. Some believe the windows absorbed more than light. They held attention, repetition, and exhaustion. They held attention, repetition, and exhaustion. The reflections seen today may be impressions left behind, repeating movements learned through years of routine. The reflections seen today may be impressions left behind, repeating movements learned through years of routine. The reflected figures never grow tired. They never fade with attention. They seem to gain clarity as the observer loses strength. Attempts to document the phenomenon rarely succeed. Cameras capture only dark glass and distorted light. Video recordings show empty reflections where witnesses swear figures stood moments before. Whatever appears in the windows does not register through lenses. It exists only in direct observation. By morning, the mill returns to its silent state. Windows reflect nothing but shadow and sky. Rooms stand empty. Physical symptoms fade with rest and distance. The experience becomes difficult to describe clearly, slipping into memory like a dream. Those who leave Black Window Mill often avoid reflective surfaces for days afterward. Mirrors feel uncomfortable. Dark glass draws unwanted attention. The sensation of being watched returns briefly in quiet moments. The mill remains unchanged, its windows dark and waiting. They do not seek attention. They simply respond when it is given. Black Window Mill stands as a place where reflection is not passive. The glass does more than return an image. It holds scenes that should have ended long ago, waiting for someone to look closely enough to see them move. Those who understand this learn quickly to glance only briefly, to keep their eyes moving, and to leave before weakness sets in. In Black Window Mill, the danger is not what appears in the glass, but how long one chooses to watch it watch back. Rust Hollow Mill sinks into a shallow ravine where moisture never fully leaves the air. The building leans slightly, as if tired, its frame coated in layers of red and brown corrosion. Metal beams flake at the edges. Railings crumble at a touch. Even the stone seems stained by time and decay. It coats floors, walls, machines, and ladders in thick, uneven textures. A constant scraping echoes through the mill. The air tastes metallic, dry, and bitter, clinging to the tongue. It does not come from one place. It slides along corridors, creeps through ceilings, and drags itself across unseen surfaces. Sometimes it sounds like metal grinding slowly against metal. Other times it resembles something being pulled across a floor just out of sight. The sound never fully stops. It only shifts, changing distance and direction without warning. Visitors soon realize the mill is never truly silent. Even when they stand perfectly still, the scraping continues, circling them. It feels deliberate, paced, as if something is moving steadily through the structure, tracing its shape over and over. The sound grows louder in narrow corridors and softer in open rooms, always present, always close. A sharp sting on exposed skin. At first, it feels like a brush against rusted metal, easily explained by the environment. But when visitors check their arms or hands, they find thin cuts where nothing made contact. Small lines, shallow but fresh, appearing without pain or cause. Clothing remains intact. No edges were touched. They do not bleed heavily. They do not tear skin violently. They simply appear, as if drawn carefully across the surface. The air itself begins to feel sharp, hostile, filled with invisible edges. Some describe the sensation as being shaped. As if the mill is not cutting at random, but adjusting visitors to its space, marking them lightly so they fit within it. The idea settles uneasily, making every step feel measured and cautious. The corridors narrow unexpectedly. Passageways pinch inward, forcing visitors to walk single file. Rusted pipes line the walls, close enough to brush shoulders. The scraping sound intensifies here, bouncing sharply between metal surfaces. It feels closer now, almost within reach. This is where figures are often seen. They move just ahead, slipping around corners or passing through intersecting hallways. The suggestion of a head turning slightly. They move at the same pace as the observer, neither fleeing nor slowing. The mill seems to close in. Walls feel closer than before. Ceilings lower. The air thickens with metallic dust. Some visitors report feeling guided. Corridors that should lead outward instead bend inward, pulling them deeper into the mill. Doors that appeared open before are now sealed by collapsed metal. Light fades unevenly, leaving some areas overly bright and others unnaturally dark. The figures appear again near these dark zones. This time closer. They stand at the edges of vision, motionless until noticed. When directly faced, they slide away, melting into rusted walls or narrow gaps between machines. No sound accompanies their disappearance. Only the scraping remains, steady and unbroken. Cuts continue to appear. More frequent now. Slightly deeper. Still controlled. Still precise. Visitors become acutely aware of their own movement, holding arms close, stepping carefully, yet the marks appear regardless. The sensation is not painful, but unsettling, as if the mill is slowly rewriting the boundaries of the body. Most decide to leave before panic sets in. Finding the exit proves difficult. Corridors loop unexpectedly. Familiar rooms look altered, their angles subtly changed. The scraping grows louder near stairwells, echoing upward and downward at the same time. When the exit is finally reached, relief comes quickly. Stepping outside feels like breaking a surface. The air clears. Sounds normalize. The scraping fades entirely the moment distance is put between the visitor and the structure. By daylight, Rust Hollow Mill appears unchanged. The rust remains thick and lifeless. The corridors look ordinary in their decay. Visitors returning during the day often doubt their experiences, convincing themselves that fear and imagination filled the gaps. Yet the marks remain. Thin cuts that take days to fade. Clothing stained faintly with rust that does not wash out easily. A metallic smell lingering on skin long after leaving. Locals avoid the mill entirely. They speak of it as a place where time wore through structure and intent alike. Where friction never ended, only slowed. They say the scraping is the sound of the mill working itself down to nothing, and anyone inside becomes part of that process. Animals refuse to enter. Tracks stop at the threshold. Birds avoid nesting nearby. Even insects thin out around the building, leaving the hollow unusually quiet except for the scraping that never seems to rest. Rust Hollow Mill continues to decay. Metal flakes fall. Beams weaken. Floors sag. Yet the structure remains standing, supported by its own corrosion. Inside, movement continues without bodies. Edges sharpen without tools. Figures glide just out of reach, shaping the space through repetition. Those who leave carry the memory with them. A phantom sting on the skin. The sound of metal dragging in quiet rooms. The feeling that the air itself can cut if given enough time. Rust Hollow Mill does not chase visitors. It does not trap them. It simply wears them. Slowly. Carefully. Until they understand why most choose not to return. Last Shift Mill stands beside a quiet stretch of river, its brick walls darkened by decades of smoke and rain. The building is large and deliberate, designed for constant motion and long hours. Windows line its upper floors, most of them opaque now with dust and age. Rusted rails cut through the yard, leading nowhere. From the outside, the mill looks like many others left behind when industry moved on. But this mill did not fade gradually. It closed suddenly, without ceremony, after a single accident brought everything to a halt. Machines stopped mid-cycle. Tools were left where they fell. Lockers remained full. The workday ended, and then it never began again. By day, the mill feels heavy with stillness. Visitors walk through wide halls where belts once turned and gears once sang. The air smells faintly of oil and old wood. It feels like a place paused rather than abandoned, as if the workers might return at any moment. As night settles, the atmosphere shifts. A whistle cuts through the darkness, long and clear, echoing across the empty yard and into the surrounding streets. The sound carries the same tone and duration described in old records, rising and falling exactly as it did when the mill was active. The signal that once marked the end of a shift. The whistle sounds only once. It does not repeat. It hangs in the air for a few seconds, then fades, leaving behind a silence that feels heavier than before. Moments later, lights flicker on inside the mill. They glow weakly through the windows, illuminating sections of the interior floor by floor. The light is not steady. It pulses briefly, as if power is flowing through systems that should no longer exist. Then, just as suddenly, everything goes dark again. There is no electrical source. Power lines were cut long ago. Panels are corroded. Switches are frozen in place. Yet the lights appear, briefly restoring the mill to a state it once knew. Visitors inside during these moments describe a wave of emotion that arrives without warning. Sadness settles deep in the chest, heavy and slow. It does not feel personal, yet it feels intimate, as though borrowed from someone else. The sensation is not sharp or overwhelming, but persistent, like grief held quietly for a long time. The feeling often grows stronger near work areas. Standing beside idle machines, visitors report an urge to remain still, to wait. The silence feels expectant. The mill seems to listen. Footsteps echo softly, then stop, as if the building prefers quiet. Some describe the sensation as standing at the end of a long day, too tired to speak, too worn to leave. The sadness carries exhaustion within it, a sense of labor completed but never released. The accident that closed the mill is rarely discussed in detail. Records exist, but they are brief and factual. A sudden failure. A life lost. Operation ceased immediately. The whistle that night was never sounded again. The shift ended without closure, without routine, without the usual release that marked the end of work. Local accounts suggest that final moment left an imprint. The mill had always been defined by rhythm. Shifts began and ended by sound and light. When that rhythm broke, it did not resolve. It stalled, frozen at the moment of stopping. At night, the mill attempts to complete that cycle. The whistle sounds. The lights come on. The signal is given. But there is no one to respond. No footsteps leaving. No doors closing behind tired workers. The ritual remains unfinished. Visitors who stay longer than a few minutes often feel the sadness deepen. Thoughts slow. Time stretches. Some sit down without realizing they have done so, resting against walls or railings as if waiting for permission to leave. The urge is not to flee, but to stay until something feels complete. Those who step outside during or after the whistle often feel immediate relief. The night air feels lighter. Sound returns to normal. The sadness lifts, though it does not disappear entirely. Looking back, the mill appears dark and silent once more, giving no sign of what just occurred. The experience does not repeat on command. Some nights pass without incident. Others bring the whistle and the lights with precise timing. There is no clear pattern. Weather does not matter. Time does not matter. The mill chooses its moments. People who grew up nearby describe hearing the whistle years after the closure. They remember waking at night, expecting to see their parents return home from work, only to find empty streets and dark windows. Over time, the sound became part of the place rather than an event, something acknowledged but not questioned. The overwhelming sadness reported by visitors is often described as shared. It feels collective rather than individual, as though many emotions are layered together, indistinct but present. The mill holds more than memory. It holds the weight of unfinished endings. Despite this, Last Shift Mill does not feel threatening. There is no sense of danger, no feeling of being chased or watched. The atmosphere is solemn rather than hostile. The building does not ask for attention. It simply continues its final routine when night allows. Those who leave the mill often carry the feeling with them for hours or days. Last Shift Mill remains standing, unchanged and quiet by daylight. But when night falls and the world grows still, the mill remembers who it was. The whistle sounds. The lights flicker. And for a brief moment, the end of a shift is announced once more, even though the work, and the sadness tied to it, never truly ended. Thank you for walking with me through the haunted abandoned mills of Indiana tonight. These buildings once powered communities, but they also consumed lives. Their walls absorbed pain, fear, and exhaustion. Though the machines stopped, the memories did not. If you ever pass an abandoned mill and hear the faint sound of machinery or voices calling from inside, remember these stories. Some places do not want to be forgotten. And some never let go of those who enter. Would you dare step inside one of these abandoned mills after dark, or would you leave the past where it belongs? Rest well, my friend. Until our next journey into the shadows.